The courtroom went silent when the door opened, not the polite silence of procedure. The kind that falls when something irreversible walks into a room. A woman in a waist crossler the floor without looking at the man who had sent her there. She took the witness stand. She folded her hands. She looked straight ahead. The man at the table turned. He recognized her immediately. His jaw set. His attorney leaned in, said something low and fast. The man did not respond. He was looking at his sister, the sister he had called 8 months ago, the sister who had agreed to everything he asked. The sister who was now sitting 30 feet away from him with 47 printed text messages in a folder on the table in front of the judge. The judge opened the folder. She began to read. Nobody in that courtroom made a sound. The camera found her at 5 in the morning, Atlanta, October, the kind of cold that doesn't apologize. A woman standing beside a food truck on a street that still smelled like last night's rain. A brown truck, gold letters. A serving window that caught the light from the street lamp above it. She wore a bodycon dress the color of red clay. Up short, fitted, heels she had no business wearing on wet asphalt at this hour. Her hair fell straight past her shoulders. Sharp silk press, not a strand out of place. She stood there like she had been standing there her whole life. Like the street belonged to her. 11 months earlier, she had left a house with one suitcase, $300, and a recipe book that belonged to a woman who had been dead for 4 years. But we are not there yet. Go back further. Go back to a kitchen, Tremy, New Orleans, a screen door that never quite closed all the way. The smell of something on the stove that you could not name, but would recognize anywhere for the rest of your life. Brown butter, smoked paprika, something sweet underneath, something that lived in the walls. That kitchen belonged to Celestine Okafor, born 1939. Lived in the same house on Ursulines Avenue for 41 years. Cooked in that same kitchen every single day. Celestine cooked for the neighbors. For the church. For anyone who came around the back and knocked on the screen door looking like they had not eaten enough that week. She did not ask what they needed. She did not make them explain. She just turned back to the stove and added another cup to whatever was already in the pot. She never charged on one. She never turned anyone away. Sunday morning, she made enough food for 30 people and set it out on the porch table, and whoever came, came. She had a recipe book, black leather cover, blue ink inside, 228 pages. 34 years of cooking written down one dish at a time. There were notes in the margins, small handwriting, careful letters, things like don't rush the roux, and more salt at the end. Always at the end. And one at the bottom of the smothered chicken page that said, this one is for when somebody needs to feel better and doesn't know how to ask. Every recipe had a note like that. Every note sounded like Celestine was standing right there beside you. Renee Okafor grew up in that kitchen. She was 5 years old the first time Celestine handed her a wood spoon and said, stir this. Not a small task to keep her busy. A real one. Celestine did not believe in tasks for children who were paying attention. By 10, Renee could make red beans and rice from memory. By 12, she was running the Sunday porch table on her own, while Celestine sat by the window and watched and said nothing unless something needed correcting. And when Celestine did correct her, it was never cruel, it was precise. More salt, not yet, let it breathe. Renee heard those words so many times they stopped sounding like instructions. They started sounding like a language, one that didn't have a written form. One that lived in the hands. Celestine died on a Tuesday morning in March, not in a hospital, not in a bed. She was standing at the stove. She put the wooden spoon down on the counter beside the pot. She walked to the kitchen chair by the window. The one she always sat in. She sat down and she didn't get up. The doctor said her heart. Renee said that was Celestine choosing where and how. She had cooked in that kitchen every day of her adult life. She was not going to leave it for a hospital room with fluorescent lights and strangers. She went the way she lived, standing over something good until the very end. Renee was 34 years old when she got that phone call. She was in Atlanta. She had been in Atlanta for 11 years. She flew home this afternoon. She sat in that kitchen for 2 hours after the funeral. Everyone else was in the living room. Renee sat at the kitchen table and looked at the stove and the counter and the wooden spoon still on its hook by the window. She didn't cook, she didn't open the recipe book, she just sat. She flew back to Atlanta the next morning. She put the recipe book on her kitchen shelf, the photograph of Celestine tucked inside the front cover. What apron, flower, both hands smiling like she'd already knew how everything turned out, stayed tucked where it was. She did not open the book again, not for 4 years. Renee met Darnell Holt when she was 26 years old. He was 29. He managed commercial loan portfolios at Peachtree Capital in Buckhead. He wore good suits. He remembered things she said 3 conversations later, details she had half forgotten herself. He had a plan for everything. That was the first thing she noticed about him. Darnell always had a plan. Their first dinner, he had already looked up the restaurant's quietest table and reserved it without being asked. Their third date, he remembered she mentioned her grandmother cooked red beans on Sundays, and he found a place downtown that made them the old way, with andouille and a bay leaf, the way they do it in Louisiana. He was paying attention, or he seemed like he was. There is a difference. Renee would learn it, but not yet. They married when Renee was 26. Small ceremony, 40 guests. Renee cooked the reception dinner herself. She spent 3 days in her sister's kitchen making dishes from the recipe book she hadn't opened in 2 years. Gumbo, smothered chicken, peach cobbler. Darnell said it would be more personal that way. He was right, it was personal. It was also the first time Renee did something large and skilled and meaningful, and Darnell received the credit for it. Because it was his reception, his guests, his colleagues from the bank who said the food was incredible, and looked at him and said, "You really know how to put something together." He didn't correct them. He just smiled and moved the conversation forward. She noticed. Somewhere in the back of her mind, behind everything else she was feeling that day, she noticed. And then she let it go, because it was her wedding day, because she loved him, because there would be time to talk about things like that later. There wasn't. Isaiah was born when Renee was 28. Layla came when she was 31. And somewhere between those 2 children and the house on Collier Road in northwest Atlanta, and the life that built itself up around her, Renee stopped noticing the small things. Because the small things happen slowly. That's how it works. The ground doesn't drop out from under you. It shifts. A little, then a little more. And by the time you realize you are standing somewhere completely different from where you started, you have been there so long it feels normal. Darnell suggested Renee stop working after Isaiah was born. "You don't need to. I've got us covered. It'll be easier for Isaiah." "You can focus on the kids," she agreed. It made sense. Childcare in Atlanta cost more than she was earning at the hotel restaurant where she'd worked for 4 years. Darnell made enough, more than enough. She would stay home. She would raise the children. She would tend a house and be there when Isaiah woke up from his nap instead of getting a phone call about it from a stranger. It made sense. 2 years later, Darnell suggested he handle the finances. "You focus on the kids, let me take care of the accounts." "That's what I do all day anyway. I can manage it better," she agreed. It made sense. He worked with money every day. She trusted him. That was the agreement. 3 years after that, Darnell said the house should be in his name only for the mortgage. Just a technicality. The loan terms are better with one primary borrower. Saves us money every month. She signed. She didn't read every page. That's what you do when you trust someone. You sign, you move on. You go back to making dinner. The credit cards came next. Her cards were closed. Fraud on the account, Darnell said. Bank issued new ones. The new cards came in his name. She never saw them. And somewhere in all of that, slowly, with no single moment she could point to and say, that was it, that was when it changed. Her name disappeared from everything. Not from the house, not from the family. Those were still hers, or felt like they were, but from the documents. From the accounts. From the papers that decide what belongs to whom when everything else falls apart. 12 years of fucking intelligent and enthusing Denver to party Darnell wanted, and managing every detail of the house and being the person who made everything run smoothly. And her name was not on a single thing that mattered. She didn't see it. That is the thing about control when it moves slowly enough. You don't feel it. You just wake up one day and the ground is somewhere else and you are standing on nothing. And you have been standing on nothing for so long that you thought it was solid. Darnell started working with Dwight Carver 16 months before Renee found out anything was wrong. Dwight Carver, 53 years old, family asset attorney, office in Sandy Springs. He did not deal in emotions, he dealt in structures. Darnell didn't need a therapist. He needed an architect, and Carver built precisely. Month 1, the mortgage. The house on Collier Road, where Red lived for 11 years, went through a refinancing that transferred the deed into Darnell's name alone. He brought the papers home on a Wednesday evening while Renee was cooking, set them on the counter, said the bank found a better rate. Said it would save them $400 a month. Said she just needed to sign the last 2 pages. She signed. Month 4, the savings account. $47,000 transferred to an individual account in Darnell's name at a different branch. Up. The statement stopped coming to the house. Renee didn't notice. She hadn't looked at a bank statement in 6 years. Up. Month 7, the investment portfolio. Locked into a trust naming Darnell as sole beneficiary. Month 10, the car title, Darnell's name only. Up. Month 13, the credit cards. Closed, 14 months, 7 documents. Every single one of them signed or processed while Renee cut dinner and helped Isaiah with his work and drove Layla to her Saturday dance class and trusted the man beside her. Up. Here is the thing Carver almost missed. Almost. There was one account he didn't find. A joint account Renee had opened in the first year of their marriage at a small credit union in New Orleans. Up. The same credit union where Celestine had banked for 30 years. It wasn't connected to the national credit system in Georgia. Up. It didn't show up in the standard financial background check Carver ran on Georgia commercial accounts. $300 in that account. Up. Money Renee had put in small amounts over the first years of her marriage, back when she still had a paycheck of her own. Up. She had forgotten it existed. Darnell had never known about it. $300. The one thing they missed. Carver called it immaterial. Up. Not worth the paperwork. The papers arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Renee was in the kitchen. She had just turned the stove off. Up. She was holding a dish towel. Darnell set the envelope on the counter between the salt shaker and a bowl of rice and walked to the doorway. Up. She opened it. She read the first page. She didn't sit down. She didn't make a sound. She stood at that counter and read every page through to the end. Up. 26 pages. Then she set them down exactly where the envelope had been. Darnell was still in the doorway. She looked at him. Up. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything. The hearing lasted 5 weeks. Carver's team moved fast because they had been moving for 14 months already. The argument was simple and brutal. Renee had no income, no individual bank account, no employment history for 10 years. No assets in her name, no credit history. On paper, Renee did not exist. Carver presented the mortgage in Darnell's name. The bank accounts in Darnell's name. The investment trust in Darnell's name. A stable 4-bedroom home. A father with a salary of $152,000 a year. The judge granted Darnell temporary primary custody of Isaiah and Layla pending final divorce proceedings, temporary. But the word did not feel temporarily standing in that courtroom. It felt like a door, and the door was closing. Renee went home that evening and stood in the kitchen and looked at everything she had made in that house for 11 years. The scuff mark on the cabinet from when Isaiah was 4 and threw a toy car across the room. The height marks on the door frame where she and Layla had measured themselves back to back. Every birthday since Layla was 3. The stain near the sink she had never fully gotten out. From the batch of red beans she'd let boil over the night, Layla had a pho, and she was running between the stove and the bedroom. She did not cry. She packed 1 suitcase, her clothes, the recipe book from the shelf above the microwave, the same shelf it had sat on for 11 years without anyone touching it. The photograph of Celestine tucked inside front cover, $300 in a small envelope from the bottom of a drawer. Tamara Webb's car pulled up at 10:15 the next morning, blue sedan, engine running. Tamara did not get out. She didn't need to. Renee put the suitcase in the back seat. She got in, she closed the door. Tamara pulled away from the curb. Renee did not look back at the house. She looked at the recipe book on her lap, black leather cover. Blue ink inside. A photograph of a woman in a white apron smiling like she already knew how everything was going to turn out. $300. No house, no car, no children beside her. No account with her name on it, no employment history. No credit. Darnell took the house, he took the car, he took the children. He took 12 years of her hands in that kitchen and made them disappear from every document that mattered. He thought he left her with nothing. Tamara Webb lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Glenwood Avenue in East Atlanta. She was 39 years old, night shift nurse at Grady Memorial, 4 nights a week, 7 to 7. And then home to a quiet apartment and coffee she had brewed 12 hours earlier. Renee slept on the sofa, a blanket from the hall closet, a pillow from the spare room Tamara used for storage. The first 3 days, Renee did not leave the apartment. She did not eat much. She sat by the living room window and looked out at the parking lot and the street beyond it and the people moving toward places they needed to be. Her phone had 2 missed messages from Isaiah. The first, "Mom, when are you coming back?" The second, "Layla keeps asking." She read both messages. She did not reply. She did not know what to say. She could not tell her son she was coming back because she did not know if that was true. She could not tell him she was fine because she was sitting on a borrowed sofa with $300 and no answer to give anyone, including herself. She put the phone face down. 3 days. 3 days of sitting, of calling, of not eating enough, of not knowing what the next thing was supposed to look like. The fourth night, Renee could not sleep. Tamara was at work. The apartment was dark. A car passed on Glenwood Avenue. Then silence. She sat up. She reached into her bag on the floor beside the sofa. Her hand found the recipe book before she even thought about reaching for it. Like her hands remembered something her mind was still catching up to. She had not opened it in 4 years. Not since she sat in Celestine's kitchen on Ursuline's Avenue after the funeral and looked at the stove and the counter and the wooden spoon on its hook and decided she could not open this book without hearing her grandmother's voice come out of it. She opened it. The photograph fell out of the front cover and landed on her lap. Celestine Okafor, 1987, white apron. Flower on both hands. Smiling, that same smile that knew something nobody else had figured out yet. Renee held the photograph for a long time. She did not move. She did not make a sound. Then she turned to the first page, Celestine's handwriting, blue ink. Careful letters, red beans and rice, the very first recipe, and in the margin in slightly smaller script. This one is for when somebody comes home. She turned another page, fried catfish, a note beside the measurements, more salt at the end, always at the end. She turned another page, smothered chicken. A note at the bottom, this one is for when somebody needs to feel better and doesn't know how to ask. She kept reading. Every page had a note. Every note was Celestine, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, just there. The way she had always been in that kitchen on Ursuline's Avenue, standing beside you without making you feel watched. Renee closed the book. She held it against her chest with both hands. She sat on that sofa in the dark for a long time. And then something shifted. Small, quiet. The way a door shifts when the latch finally catches. She didn't know yet what she was going to do. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a business. She didn't have a kitchen of her own, or a permit, or a truck, or a table. She had a book and a photograph, and $300. And she had hands that had been doing this since she was 5 years old. The next morning, she was up before Tamara got home. She went to the kitchen. She opened the recipe book on the counter. She turned to page 14. She started cooking. When Tamara opened the front door at 7:15, the apartment smelled like smoked paprika and brown butter and something sweet beneath that she couldn't but recognized immediately, the way you recognize the smell of somewhere you've always felt safe. Tamara stood in the doorway. Renee stood at the stove, dress fitted, deep burgundy, hair pulled back smooth. Two women looking at each other in a small kitchen in East Atlanta at 7 in the morning. Neither of them said much for a moment. Then Renee said, "I need to find somewhere to sell this." And Tamara said, "I know a Saturday market." Renee divided the $300 at Tamara's kitchen table that same afternoon. $88 for the food handler's permit and a temporary vendor license from Fulton County. She had looked up the requirements at the public library on Ponce de Leon that morning, sitting at a computer terminal for 90 minutes and reading every line of the Georgia Department of Agriculture vendor regulations. $145 for ingredients: chicken thighs, long-grain rice, dried kidney beans, oil, smoked paprika, bay leaves, onions, celery. Garlic, $42 for containers, foil trays, plastic lids, forks wrapped in napkins, $25 left over, not a buffer. A reminder. She took the number 14 bus to the Fulton County Health Department on a Tuesday morning and stood in line for 2 hours. She paid $88. She received a card and a permit number and a sheet of paper listing what she was and was not allowed to sell. Then she came back to Tamara's kitchen and started cooking for Saturday. She was 38 years old. She had $300, a temporary vendor permit, and a recipe book that had been sitting on a shelf in another woman's kitchen for 11 years. She had no idea what she was building. She just knew her hands, and her hands had never forgotten a single thing Celestine taught them. The first Saturday, she sold 4 containers, 4. Out of 40, she had packed and carried and hauled on 2 buses and set up on a folding table borrowed from a church she knew, between a woman's soy candles and a man with handmade cutting boards who had a banner and a tablecloth and a whole branded setup that looked like a small business. Renee had a piece of cardboard with prices written in marker. She stood behind that table from 6 in the morning. She did not call out to anyone, did not wave people over, did not do the thing vendors do when they're desperate, that lean forward and smile routine that makes people walk faster in the other direction. She just stood there and waited. Most people walked past without slowing down. Some glanced. Some looked at the cardboard sign. Some looked at her, then kept moving. By 11:30, she had sold exactly 4 containers at $5 each, $20. Which didn't cover the bus fare both ways, plus the cost of the foil trays. She stood there and did not let herself think about that math. Then a woman stopped, mid-50s, church hat, wide brim, deep purple. She looked at the sign, looked at the pots. Looked at Renee, 1 container. She paid. She opened it right there at the table edge. She ate standing up. She didn't say anything for a full minute, just ate. Then she looked up. This tastes like my grandmother's kitchen. Just that, nothing more. She bought 3 more containers. She asked Renee her name. She asked if Renee would be here next Saturday. Renee said yes, and that was the number that mattered. Not 4, not $20, not the math that didn't add up. One woman who tasted something and said it reminded her of somewhere she loved. That was the only number that mattered. Week 2, 28 containers. Week 3, 5. Week 4, 40 containers, sold or 1 in the afternoon. The numbers didn't jump. They climbed, steadily, without stopping. Which would have been a clean story except for one problem. Renee was cooking in Tamara's kitchen. And Tamara's kitchen was not a licensed commercial kitchen. Under Georgia cottage food law, a home kitchen could be used to prepare certain foods for direct sale. Baked goods, shelf-stable items, jams and jellies and things that didn't need refrigeration and didn't contain meat. Smothered chicken over rice was not on that list. Renee found out on a Wednesday afternoon at the public library on Ponce de Leon Avenue. She didn't have a laptop. Didn't have internet at the apartment. She sat at a library computer and read the Georgia Department of Agriculture cottage food regulations line by line for 3 hours. Licensed commercial kitchen, inspected, certified, available for hourly rental at shared kitchen facilities across the city, $15 to $25 an hour depending on location. She did the math on the back of a receipt from the discount grocery on Memorial Drive. 4 hours of prep cooking per week at $15 an hour. $60. She needed to sell at least 25 containers just to cover the kitchen before ingredients and bus fare and supplies. She sat there in that library chair and looked at the number she had written. Then she wrote it again, slower, to make sure she hadn't made a mistake. She had not made a mistake. She registered for 2 more markets. Tuesday evenings at the Grant Park Farmers Market. Thursday afternoons at the Kirkwood Community Market. 3 markets, 3 bus rides each week. 2 pots, 1 folding table, 1 rolling cart she bought for $12 at a thrift store on Memorial Drive. This was not a business plan. This was not a dream. This was a woman doing the only thing available to her with the only things she had. She needed a kitchen. Greater Grace Baptist Church sat on Jonesboro Road in southeast Atlanta. Tamara had mentioned it once. Said the church rented out its commercial basement kitchen to small food vendors and caterers, $15 an hour, inspected. Certified. Renee called on a Monday morning. She booked 4 hours every Monday and Wednesday. She showed up at 4 in the morning both days and cooked enough for all 3 markets. She did not know when she signed that rental agreement that someone was watching. Pastor Gloria Sims had been running Greater Grace for 20 years. She was 67 years old. She knew everyone in that building and everything that happened in it. She knew who used her kitchen and why and whether they cleaned up after themselves. She watched Renee for 6 weeks before she said a single word. She came downstairs during cooking hours twice, stood in the doorway. Smelled whatever was coming off that stove, watched Renee work. Went back upstairs, never interrupted, never introduced herself, just watched. On a Thursday evening at the end of the 6th week, Pastor Gloria came downstairs after Renee had finished cleaning the kitchen and was packing her containers into the rolling cart. She pulled a chair from under the prep table. She sat down. She looked at Renee for a moment. "I'm smelling cooking for 6 weeks," she said. "I've watched you carry those pots in here at 4 in the morning. I've watched you clean this kitchen better than anyone who has ever rented it." She paused. "What are you doing, and who are you doing it for?" Not question statements, the kind that expect honesty. So Renee told her, short sentences, no drama, no self-pity. She told her about the divorce, the $300, the recipe book, the markets, the bus routes, the rolling cart at 5 in the morning. Pastor Gloria listens to all of it without moving. Then she told Renee something. Her husband, Earl Sims, had died 9 years ago, 59 years old. Heart attack on a Sunday morning before the 8 o'clock service. Earl had been a deacon and a pitmaster. He owned a food truck, green and white. Parked it behind the church every Sunday after the late service and sold barbecue plates for $6 each. Ribs, coleslaw, cornbread. The line went around the building. When Earl died, Gloria could not bring herself to sell the truck. She parked it behind the fellowship hall. She covered it with a tarp. She told herself she would figure out what to do with it. Every year, she did not 9 years. Come with me, she said. She walked Renee around the back of the church. Gravel lot behind the fellowship hall. She pulled back the tarp. Green paint, faded and chipping. 2 flat tires on the passenger side. Dust on every window. A dent in the rear bumper from parking lot incident Earl never got around to fixing. The serving window's metal shutter stuck halfway open like it had given up midway and decided that was enough. Renee opened the side door. Stepped inside. 2 gas burners, 1 prep counter, a small refrigerator that hadn't run in years, the serving window with its stubborn shutter. The smell of old grease and metal, and something underneath that might have been hickory smoke, still faint after 9 years under a tarp. She put her hands flat on the prep counter. She looked at the burners, the window, the space where plates would be handed out. She could see it. For the first time since the Sotoyef on Glenwood Avenue, she could see what the next thing looked like. I'm not giving this to you, Pastor Gloria said from outside. Earl built this, I won't give it away, but I will rent it to you for $100 a month. You fix it yourself. If it runs and your business holds for 6 months, I will sell it to you at what Earl paid for it in 2006. Renee looked at her. How much? $4,200. Renee looked back at the truck. At the flat tires. The peeling paint, the shutter that didn't close. I don't have money to fix it. I have a church full of people who know how to fix things, Pastor Gloria said. Ask. Byron Gates was 44 years old. He had been a member of Greater Grace for 17 years. He drove a work truck with rust along the wheel wells into the toolbox in the bed that weighed more than some cars. He ran a one-man mechanic shop out of a garage on Cleveland Avenue, mostly word of mouth, mostly people who couldn't afford the dealership prices and needed someone who would be straight with them. Pastor Gloria asked him to look at the truck on a Saturday morning. He looked, he came back out and told Renee, fuel needs replacing. Battery is dead, alternator is corroded, probably some other things once he got further in. Parts would run around $380. Labor, he said, was free, because Pastor Gloria asked, and because any woman willing to pull a rolling cart onto a city bus at 5 in the morning to sell 40 plates of food deserved a truck that started. He didn't say that second part to Renee. He said it to Pastor Gloria later quietly while Renee was measuring the truck's interior dimensions. But Renee heard. She didn't say anything. She just wrote down the dimensions in her notebook and kept her face still. 3 Saturdays in a row, Byron worked on that truck. He came in the morning. He left when the light got bad. He came back the following Saturday and started again. The exterior needed work too. Renee handled that herself. She sanded the body panels on weekday evenings after her market days. Her arms ached. Her hands got dry and raw from the sandpaper. She wore a bodycon dress in deep teal the first night she sanded, because she had come straight from the Thursday market and didn't have time to change, and Byron's nephew, who came to help one evening, looked at her in that dress with sandpaper in her and said something under his breath that Byron immediately shut down. Which was the right call. Renee didn't dignify it with a look. She just kept sanding. The paint was new. Deep brown. Warm, the color of good earth after rain. Renee chose it herself from sample cards at the hardware store on Jonesboro Road. The lettering she did herself. She cut a stencil from cardboard, took her time with the curves. Gold paint from the same hardware store, $6 a bottle. She laid out the name across the side panel in 2 lines, slightly larger than she had originally planned, because when she held the smaller stencil up against the brown paint, it disappeared. The name needed to be seen. Celestine's Kitchen, her grandmother's name, on a truck that ran, in a parking lot behind a church in southeast Atlanta. On a brown panel that she had sanded and painted herself. Renee stepped back and looked at it. She didn't say anything. She reached into her bag and took out the photograph. Celestine Okafor, 1987, white apron, flower on both hands, smiling that smile. She taped it to the inside wall of the truck, right beside the serving window at eye level. Then she went inside and turned the burners on. The first month on the road, Renee parked on Wells Street in the industrial corridor south of Turner Field, lunchtime. 11:30 to 1:30. Warehouse workers and truck drivers and a construction crew from a site 2 blocks over who started showing up in groups by the second week. $7 a plate, smothered chicken over rice, red beans, catfish on Fridays. Week 132. After the cost of ingredients, minus gas for the truck, minus the $100 month rentals was split across the days she worked that week, she cleared about $41 per day. Not enough for rent, not enough for a security deposit, not enough for anything except ingredients for the next day. But the line was longer on Tuesday than it had been on Monday, and longer on Wednesday than Tuesday. A foreman named Willis came every day at 11:45. He didn't talk much. He ordered the same thing every time: smothered chicken, extra rice. He ate it leaning against his truck with his hard hat pushed back on his head and his eyes closed for the first few bites. Like he was somewhere else for a minute, like he needed that minute. By the end of the first month, he had told the crew on the next site over, and the crew on the site after that. And the word that got passed was not "this food truck is good." The word was "she's the real thing." Go on a Tuesday. Get there before noon month 2, Renee added a second location. Downtown. Peachtree Street and Andrew Young International Boulevard, 5 to 8 in the evening. The after-work crowd. Office workers walking to the parking decks. Nurses coming off shift at Grady Memorial who knew Tamara and had heard about the truck and wanted to see for themselves. The evening location doubled her customer base. Revenue climbed to $150 a day after costs. Still not enough for a lease. But closer, something she could feel closing in. Month 3. The phone started ringing. Customers calling to ask where she was parked. You on Wells Street today? You coming to Kirkwood on Thursday? She didn't have a website. Didn't have a marketing strategy. She had a phone number written on the side of the truck in gold paint and 40 plates that sold out every single day. Tamara set up a Facebook page on a Sunday afternoon, Celestine's Kitchen. One photograph of the truck parked on Wells Street with the serving window open and 3 people lined up. The menu, the daily location posted every morning at 5. 2 weeks later, 500 followers. 4 weeks later, 1,400. People shared it. People tagged their cousins and their co-workers and the friends they'd been trying to get to come try it. People posted pictures of their plates and wrote things underneath. Best soul food in Atlanta. This reminds me of home. I don't know how she does it. Renee kept the notebook every night. Revenue on the left, costs on the right. Notes at the bottom. Catfish sells out before noon on Fridays. Red beans move slower on Wednesdays. Try the okra next week. Corn muffins. Check the cobbler recipe on page 63. She tracked every dollar the way Celestine used to track every recipe. Carefully. In ink, no shortcuts. She called Isaiah and Layla every evening at 7:30. The custody arrangement allowed 2 afternoon visits per week and every other weekend. Renee brought food to every single visit. She packed it in foil containers and carried it in an insulated bag on the bus to the house on Collier Road. Where she was no longer allowed inside, she handed the bag to Isaiah at the door. She sat on the porch steps with both children and watched them eat. Layla said the same thing every time. "This is the best food in the world, Mom." Every time, same words. Same voice. Same absolute certainty that this was simply true and not up for discussion. And Rennie was smubbing when say nothing because what do you say to that? What do you say when your 6-year-old hands you the one thing you needed to hear? One evening in the 3rd month, Isaiah ate quietly for a while. Then he said something low between bites. Asked where you park the truck. Renee kept her face still. What did you say? And the food is good. She looked at her son, 9 years old. Careful. Already learning when to answer a question and when to answer a different one. That's the right answer, she said. Isaiah looked at her. He knew she was not talking about the food. He ate another bite. She wanted to ask what else Darnell had asked. She didn't, because Isaiah was 9 years old and she was not going to make him carry something that was not his to carry. She tucked it away, something to think about later. Deja Holt started coming around in the 3rd month, Darnell's younger sister. 33 years old. She lived in a townhouse in Smyrna that she'd bought 3 years ago. Darnell listed as co-signer on the mortgage. She worked in marketing at a firm in Midtown. She dressed well, she spoke carefully. She reached out to Renee 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The message was simple. Said she didn't agree with what her brother did. Said family was family regardless of legal papers. Said she wanted to help however she could. Renee thought about it for 3 days before she responded, because something in her said be careful. Some part of her that had spent 12 years not reading the paperwork was now reading everything very slowly. But Deja showed up. And Deja was kind. And Deja helped wipe down the serving counter after the lunch rush on Tuesdays. And Deja brought paper towels and napkins in bulk from the whole club because she had a membership and Renee didn't. And it was nice. Having someone from that side of the family who didn't act like Renee had ceased to exist. What Renee didn't know, 8 months before he handed her those divorce papers, Darnell had called Deja. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He reminded Deja quietly and precisely that he was the co-signer on her mortgage. That without his name on that loan, her credit score alone would not support the monthly payments. He told her he needed her to stay close to Renee. Keep him informed. What she was doing, what she was building, who was helping her. Deja sat with the phone in her lap after the call and did the math. $195,000 on a townhouse in Smyrna. Her salary covered the payment. That's barely. The co-signer status was what made the interest rate manageable. Without it, the rate climbed, the payment climbed. She'd run those numbers 2 years ago when she bought the place. She ran them again that night, same result. So she called Renee, and she helped wipe down the counter, and she asked the right questions at the right times. And 14 minutes after every conversation, a text message went to Darnell's phone. What truck? Which street? How many customers? When she filed for custody. What the lawyer's name was. Every piece of information Renee shared with the person she believed was on her side traveled directly to the person who had taken everything from her. The camera, if this were a film, would cut here. Every time Renee laughed with Deja at the serving window, cut to Deja in her car in a parking lot somewhere, typing. Every time Renee told Deja about something good that happened, cut to the phone screen lighting up on Darnell's kitchen counter. But Renee didn't know that yet. She was too busy building. 4 months after the divorce, Renee filed a motion for joint custody of Isaiah and Layla. Simone Achibi handled the filing, 31 years old. 3rd year at Atlanta Legal Aid Family Law Division, she had handled 52 custody cases. She had not lost one where the mother could demonstrate stable income and confirmed housing. She had also never gone up against Dwight Carver. Carver filed Darnell's response within 8 days, 44 pages. The custody review hearing was held at Fulton County Superior Court on Pryor Street on a Tuesday morning. Judge Eleanor Vance presiding, same woman, same bench, different filing. Renee sat at one table, Darnell sat at the other. They did not look at each other. Carver presented screenshots of Celestine's kitchen Facebook page, 1,400 followers. Photographs of the truck parked on Wells Street. Renee's self-reported income from 3 months of operation, which varied week to week. The fact that Renee had been living on a friend's sofa for the first 60 days following the divorce and had only recently secured independent housing. He framed every piece of evidence the same way: instability. A woman without a permanent address for the first 2 months. A woman running what he called an informal street food operation out of a second-hand vehicle she didn't own. A woman whose income fluctuated based on weather and foot traffic and whether people felt like eating outside. This is not a stable environment for children, Carver said. He did not mention the food handler's permit. He did not mention the commercial kitchen certification. He did not mention the vendor licenses or the truck rental agreement or the tax filings Simone had already prepared. He mentioned none of those things because mentioning them would make Renee look like what she was, a business owner. Simone went second. She was 22 years younger than Carver. She did not have his reputation in that courtroom or his voice or his suits. She had a folder. Inside the folder, 3 months of self-employment tax filings showing consistent upward revenue, a signed lease for a studio apartment on Memorial Drive, $850 a month, Renee's name on it. A food handler's permit from Fulton County, a commercial kitchen rental agreement with Greater Grace Baptist Church, a truck rental agreement with Pastor Gloria Sims, and 14 handwritten letters from customers, each one different, each one saying the same thing in different words. This woman works hard. This woman shows up. This woman fed me on a Tuesday when I had $12 in my pocket and I needed something real. And one letter from Pastor Gloria Sims, 20 years running a church in Southeast Atlanta, stating that Renee had rented her kitchen for 4 months without missing a single payment. That she cleaned the space better than anyone who had ever used it. That the people of Greater Grace trusted her. That she was, in Pastor Gloria's words, the kind of woman who builds things with her hands and doesn't ask for applause. Judge Vance read through everything. She looked at Carver, she looked at Simone, she looked at Renee. She did not rule. She continued the case 60 days. She said she wanted to see sustained income and confirmed housing stability before making a custody determination. Both parents would maintain the current arrangement during the continuance. She called the next case. Renee walked out of the courtroom and stood in the parking lot on Prior Street. 60 days. She needed to hold $200 a day for 60 days without a gap. She needed to keep the apartment. She needed to file 2 more months of clean tax records. She needed to not miss a single payment on anything. She stood in the parking lot and thought about all of that. Then she looked at her phone. One message from Layla. Are you coming to get us, Mom? 3 words. No punctuation. The way a 6-year-old texts when she has borrowed someone else's phone and is typing as fast as she can before it gets taken away. Renee stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then she put the phone in her bag and walked to her truck. 60 days. Day 1 through 20, Renee worked 6 in the morning to 9 at night. She cooked in the church kitchen starting at 4. She drove to Wells Street for lunch. She drove downtown for dinner. She added 2 new dishes from the recipe book. Celestine's fried okra, page 47, and the peach cobbler, page 112, the one with the note in the margin that said, "This one is not for dessert." This one's for when somebody deserves something good and hasn't had it in a while. Both sold out the first day. Revenue climbed to $220 a day, then $240. Day 25, Renee signed lease renewal on the studio apartment, address confirmed through the end of the year. She mailed a copy to Simone. Day 30, she filed her 4th month of self-employment taxes, gross revenue up 11% from the prior month. And then came day 24, which she would remember differently from the others. Day 24 started with rain. Not the kind of Atlanta rain that passes in 20 minutes. The kind that settles in, steady, gray. The kind that makes people drive food trucks without stopping, Monday through Wednesday that week. Rain every day. Revenue dropped, not to nothing, but enough, and the refrigeration unit in the truck gave out on Wednesday evening. $430 to replace the compressor. She called 3 shops, same number, give or take. She sat in the truck after the dinner service, serving window closed, the rain still going outside, and she did that math she had promised herself she wouldn't do. Truck rental due in 6 days, kitchen rental due in 8. Ingredients for Thursday already purchased, $312 in the business account. She sat there for a long time, the rain on the roof of that truck, steady, unhurried, not apologizing. Her phone lit up. Isaiah video call. She looked at the screen, his face already visible, waiting to see if she'd answer. She picked up. He was sitting on his bed, lamp on, pajamas, hair not combed the way it got by the end of the day when nobody had reminded him. He looked at her through the screen and she looked at him. "You okay, Mom?" "I'm okay, just tired." "You look like you've been outside." "I have been." It was raining. Isaiah looked at her for a moment. The way he had always looked at her, even as a small child, like he was reading something just below the surface. "Mom, yeah. Layla saved you some of the peach cobbler from last time. She's got it in a container in the back of the fridge." She said nobody is allowed to touch it, which was the most Layla thing in the world, her daughter. 6 years old, guarding cobbler like it was sacred. Renee kept her face still. "Tell her thank you," she said. She kept her voice level. She did not cry on the phone with her son. She was not going to do that to him. "I will," Isaiah said. "Good night, Mom. Good night, baby." She hung up. She sat in that truck for a while after. Then she reached into her bag on the passenger seat. She took out the recipe book. She opened it to the last page Celestine had written. And on the inside back cover, in a different pen, different ink color, written later, the handwriting slightly looser, like it was written quickly or at the end of a long day. "When you don't have anything left, the kitchen is still there. The kitchen won't leave you." Renee held the book open to that page. She read it twice. Then she picked up the phone and called Byron Gates at 11:30 at night. He answered on the second ring. She said the refrigeration unit was down. She said she had a custody deadline and she could not afford to lose days of service. Byron said, "What's the address?" She gave it. He arrived at 12:45 with his toolbox in the bed of his truck, his headlights the only movement in the parking lot behind Greater Grace at that hour. He worked in the dark with a work light clipped to the truck frame. She stood inside and handed him tools when he asked. Neither of them said much. The compressor ran again at 2:15 in the morning. Byron cleaned his hands on a rag and closed it at the toolbox. Renee said, "What do I owe you?" Byron said, "When you get those kids back, you make me a plate." "That's what you owe me." And he got in his truck and drove away. Renee stood in the parking lot behind the church at 2:15 in the morning. Wet gravel. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean and cold. She stood there for a minute, just 1 minute. Then she went back inside the truck and turned the burner on to check the temperature. Still calibrated, still right. Up, still there. On the 38th day, a woman walked up to the serving window on Peachtree Street at 6:15 in the evening. Up, 34 years old, short hair natural, a press badge clipped to the lapel of her jacket. She ordered one plate. Up, smothered chicken. She stood on the sidewalk 10 feet from the truck and ate. She finished. She walked back to the window. Up, how long have you been doing this? Renee told her, short sentences, just the facts. The woman nodded slowly. Up, like she was doing math. My name is Camille Fox. I work at the news station on 14th Street. I'm producing a series on black-owned small businesses in Atlanta. Up, she paused. Can I feature you? Renee looked at her. Let me think about it. Take your time, Camille said. Up, she left a card. That night, Renee sat on the floor of the studio apartment on Memorial Drive, the recipe book open on the counter across the room. Up, she called Tamara. A reporter wants to do a piece on me, she said. Tamara was quiet for a moment. Up, just one beat. What would Celestine say? Renee looked at the book across the room. She didn't answer right away. Up, she called Camille the next morning. Deja called Renee on a Wednesday evening, same week. Regular call. Regular questions. How's business? Up, how are the kids? Then I heard a reporter came by the truck. What was that about? Renee told her. Up, local news piece. Small business series. Camille wanted to film at the truck and do a short interview. Nothing about the divorce. Up, just the food. Just the story of how she started. Deja said that sounded wonderful, said she was proud of Renee. Arp said she hoped it brought more customers. Deja hung up. She sat in her car in a parking lot in Smyrna. Arp, she opened her phone and typed reporter named Camille Fox. Station on 4th, small business series, filming at the truck. Arp, interview coming. No divorce angle. She read it back once. She sent it, the message delivered to Darnell's phone at 8:47 in the evening. Arp, he read it. He called Dwight Carver the next morning, and Carver, being Carver, did exactly what he was paid to do. Arp, he drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to Camille Fox and the news station on 14th Street. The letter stated that any broadcast segment referencing Darnell Holt or the details of his divorce proceedings would constitute defamation and would result in immediate legal action. Arp, he sent it certified mail and email, same day. Darnell thought he was stopping something. He was starting something. He just didn't know it yet. Camille received the letter on a Thursday morning. She read it once. She walked it down the hall to her executive producer. He read it. He sat back in his chair. He looked at Camille. The original segment was supposed to be 2 minutes. A feel-good local piece, end of the 6 o'clock broadcast. A woman, a food truck, a good story. The kind people watch and forget by the time they get up to do the dishes. The cease and desist changed everything, because now the story wasn't just about a woman who built something from nothing. Now the story was about a man sitting behind a lawyer's desk trying to stop her. The executive producer said, 9 minutes. Prime time, 3-day shoot, 2 cameras. He said, I want the recipe book, I want the photograph, I want the serving window and the line down the street and every regular customer who'll talk on camera. He said, and I want to know everything about how she got here. He said all of this while Darnell sat in the house on Collier Road thinking he had just solved a problem. He had not solved a problem. He had just turned a food truck story into a story about power and who had it. And who thought they did. Camille Fox arrived at the Greater Grace kitchen at 4:15 in the morning. Renee was already inside. The stove was on. The recipe book was open on the prep counter to page 51. Celestine's smothered chicken. The one with the note at the bottom. This one is for when somebody needs to feel better and doesn't know how to ask. Camille stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at what was in front of her. Low light, steam rising from the first pot. A woman in a fitted dress the color of deep amber, hair straight and smooth past her shoulders, moving between the counter and the stove with the kind of efficiency that only comes from doing something so many times it stops being a decision. It just becomes motion, it just becomes who you are. Camille told the cameraman one thing before they went in. Shoot what you see, don't set anything up, so that's what they did. Renee did not look at the camera. Not once. She measured and stirred and tasted and adjusted the weight say Celestine had taught her in a kitchen in Tremé 30 years ago, in a house that smelled like this one smelled right now. She tilted her head the same way when something needed salt. She held the wooden spoon the same way. She moved with the particular stillness of someone who has nothing left to prove to anyone in the room. The camera caught all of it. The recipe book open on the counter. The black leather cover soft from years of handling, the blue ink inside, careful handwriting, notes in the margins. The photograph of Celestine on the wall next to the serving window, white apron, flower on both hands, that smile. They followed Renee to the truck. They filmed her driving to Wells Street, the setup, the serving window opening at 11:30. The first customers walking up, the line that went past the corner by noon and didn't shorten until she sold the last plate at 1:15. Between the lunch and dinner shifts, Camille sat across from Renee inside the truck. Small microphone, script, no prepared questions written on a card. Renee sat on the prep stool, fitted amber dress, hair smooth and straight, hands resting on her knees. She didn't fidget. Didn't shift toward a better version of herself for the camera. Didn't do any of the things people do when they know they're being recorded. She just sat there and talked. I started with $300, she said, and a folding table, and a recipe book my grandmother wrote by hand over 34 years. She paused, a real pause, not for effect. I lost everything I thought I had. Then I found everything I actually needed. The camera moved to the recipe book, then to the photograph on the wall. Camille interviewed 3 customers that afternoon. Willis, the foreman from the Wells Street construction site, who said he had eaten at that truck every working day for 5 months and planned to keep doing it until somebody physically stopped him. A nurse from Grady Memorial who said the fried okra tasted exactly like her grandmother's recipe and she had given up trying to understand how that was possible and just accepted it as fact. And the woman from the very first Saturday at the East Atlanta Village Market. Wide-brimmed church hat, deep purple. She looked at the camera the same way she had looked at Renee 8 months ago on that first morning when 4 containers sat unsold and the day felt like it might not mean anything. This food tastes like my grandmother's kitchen, she said. I don't know how she does it, but it does. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. Prime time, 9 minutes. The title card read, Celestine's Kitchen. $300 and a recipe book. 48 hours later, the Facebook page went from 1,400 followers to 26,000. The line at the truck doubled, then it doubled again. 3 other stations contacted Camille about the footage. The clip moved across social media the way things move when they hit something true. Not because anyone pushed it, because people kept passing it to someone else with one sentence underneath. You need to watch this. 230,000 views in the first week. Darnell was in the living room of the house on Collier Road when the segment started. He wasn't watching. The television was background noise the way it usually was in the evenings. He was looking at his phone. Half present, waiting for nothing in particular. Then he heard the name, Celestine's Kitchen. He looked up, brown truck, gold letters. A serving window with a line of people in front of it that went past the frame, and Renee inside. At the stove, in an apron over that amber dress, tilting her head the way she always tilted it when she was deciding whether something needed more seasoning. Moving her hands the exact same way she had moved them every day for 12 years in the kitchen 12 feet from where he was sitting right now. He watched. He saw the recipe book on the prep counter. Black leather cover, he recognized it. It had sat on the shelf above the microwave in this kitchen for the entire length of their marriage. 11 years on that shelf. He had walked past it at times than he could count. He had never touched it. Not once. He saw the photograph on the wall next to the serving window. An older woman in a white apron with flour on her hands. He had lived in the same house as that photograph for 11 years. He had never asked who she was. He heard a customer say the food tasted like her grandmother's kitchen. He heard Renee say she lost everything she thought she had and found everything she actually needed. He saw the number on the screen, $300. The account Carver had found and dismissed, not worth the paperwork. $300, that had become a truck. 26,000 people, and a line around a city block in 9 minutes of prime time that 230,000 people had already watched. Darnell sat very still. He was not having a revelation. He was not feeling something open up inside him about what he had missed or failed to see. He was doing what he always did, running numbers, recalculating. The variable he had underestimated was not Renee's grief or her strength or her grandmother's recipes. The variable he had underestimated was the $300. Carver had said it wasn't worth pursuing, not material. And Darnell agreed, because at the time, with $47,000 in savings and a house, and both children and every document and structured exactly the way he needed it to be, $300 was nothing. Except it wasn't nothing. It was the one thing he didn't control, and the one thing he didn't control had turned into the only thing anyone in Atlanta was talking about. He picked up the remote. He turned the television off. He sat in the house he had taken from his wife and looked at the dark screen and understood, For the first time in 16 months of careful planning, that he had made an error. Not a moral error. He wasn't sitting there thinking about what he had done to Renee, or what it had cost her, or what it had cost their children. He was thinking about the calculation. Where it had gone wrong, he picked up the phone. "Can we use this against her in court?" he said when Carver answered. Carver said he would look at the footage and have something done by morning. Darnell said, "Good." He set the phone down. He looked at the dark screen. He still thought he could fix this. He was wrong about that. But he wouldn't find out until the courtroom on Pryor Street on a Wednesday morning in October. Carver filed a supplemental brief with Judge Vance's court 11 days before the 60-day hearing. The argument was built from the same material Carver always used. Instability. A woman more interested in public attention than in her children's welfare. The filing pointed to the television segment. The Facebook page and its 26,000 followers. The timeline of Camille's approach and Renee's decision to participate. The respondent has prioritized media exposure over demonstrating the stable, private environment this court requested 60 days ago, the brief read. Rather than focusing on her children, she has chosen to make herself a public figure during an active custody proceeding. Carver did not mention that the cease and desist letter from his own office was what had turned a 2-minute local segment into 9 minutes of prime time. He did not mention that Renee had not contacted the station. He did not mention the only person who had introduced legal conflict into the media of his client, through a letter that a news station's executive producer had read and immediately understood as a much larger story than the one he had originally been offered. Carver did not mention any of those things. He filed. Simona Cheb read the supplemental brief on a Friday afternoon. She read it twice. Then she made 2 phone calls. The first was to Renee. "Is there anyone on Darnell's side who has been close to you since the divorce?" "Anyone you've talked to about the business or the custody case or the reporter?" Renee was quiet. 3 seconds. "Maybe 4. Deja," she said. "Tell me about Deja." Renee told her everything. The calls, the visits to the truck, the paper towels from the wholesale club, the conversations about Byron and Pastor Gloria and Camille and the interview timeline. Simone listened without interrupting. When Renee finished, Simone said, "Don't call her, don't change anything, just let me work." The second call Simone made was not to Renee. The 60-day hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in October, Fulton County Superior Court, Pryor Street, Judge Eleanor Vance. Same courtroom, same 2 tables, Renee on the left, Darnell on the right. They did not look at each other. Renee wore a bodycon dress in deep burgundy, fitted, short. Her hair fell straight and smooth past her shoulders. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded on the table in front of her. Not performing calm, actually calm, because she had done everything the court asked, every single day of the 60, 4 in the morning only in the church kitchen. Wells Street at lunch, downtown at dinner. 2 months of tax records filed clean, the lease renewal on the studio apartment. The social worker's report, both visits, both of times the apartment was clean and the children's rooms were ready and there was food in the refrigerator. Whatever happened in this room, so she had done her part. Carver went first. He presented to the television segment as Exhibit A. The Facebook page at 26,000. Initial email to Renee. The full timeline of the media coverage from first contact to broadcast. He framed it the way he framed everything. The respondents chose to place herself in the public eye during an active custody proceeding, he said. That is not the behavior of a mother focused on stability. That is the behavior of someone more interested in attention than in her children. He said it with the confidence of a man who had been practicing family law for 30 years and had never once been asked to account for his own cease and desist letter in open court. Simone went second. She was quieter than Carver, younger. She did not fill the room the way he did. She laid out 5 months of self-employment tax records. Revenue climbing every single month, no gaps. The lease renewal on Memorial Drive, the court-appointed social worker's report. And 23 letters. Customers, Pastor Gloria, Byron Gates, Tamara, Willis the foreman, the nurse from Grady, the woman in the purple church hat who had been showing up to that truck since the first Saturday when 4 containers sat on a folding table and most people walked past. Then she turned to the television segment. Mr. Crawford's first item from Scott Crossod's my Smut's client sought public attention during a custody proceeding, Simone said. I'd like to address the sequence of events that actually produced that broadcast. She walked the court through it. Camille Fox had approached Renee as a customer before she identified herself as a journalist. Renee had not contacted the station. Renee had not mentioned Darnell or the divorce on camera. The original segment was 2 minutes, local interest, end of the 6 o'clock broadcast. The segment became 9 minutes of prime time, Sassone said, because Mr. Carver sent a cease and desist letter to the news station. That letter is what prompted the executive producer to expand the segment. My client did not seek its attention. She sold plates of food. The only party who introduced legal conflict into this media story was the petitioner himself through his attorney. She let that land. Then, Your Honor, I have one additional witness. Carver looked up. Judge Vance said, "Proceed." The courtroom door opened. Deja Holt walked in. She wore a gray blazer. Her hands were steady at her sides. She walked to the front of the courtroom without looking at the table on the right. Darnell turned in his chair. He looked at his sister. Deja did not look back. She took the witness stand. She stated her name. She stated her relationship to both parties. She said she was Darnell Holt's younger sister and that she had been in regular contact with Renee Okafor since approximately 2 months after the divorce was finalized. Simone asked why she had reached out to Renee. Deja said she wanted to help. She said she believed what her brother did was wrong. Simone asked whether Deja had communicated information about Renee to Darnell during that time. The courtroom was very quiet. Deja looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked at Simone. Yes, one word, and then everything that followed it. She said Darnell had contacted her 8 months before the divorce papers were served. He told her he needed her to stay close to Renee after the divorce and keep him informed. He made clear that if she didn't cooperate, he would remove himself as co-signer from the mortgage on her townhouse in Smyrna. She said she understood what that would mean. She said she ran the numbers that same night and made a choice. She said the choice was wrong and she had known it was wrong when she made it and had kept making it anyway for 5 months. She described what she had provided, details about the food truck and its locations, the custody filing and Simone's name. Byron Gates and Pastor Gloria Sims, approach from Camille Fox and the timeline for the interview and the broadcast. Every conversation she had with Renee passed along within 14 minutes of ending the call. Simone let the courtroom hold that for a moment. Then what changed, Miss Holt? Deja looked at her. He removed himself from the mortgage anyway, she said, 6 weeks ago. I hadn't forwarded the information about the filming schedule fast enough. He said I wasn't holding up my end of the arrangement. She stopped. The bank began foreclosure proceedings 11 days later. Another pause. Shorter. I did everything he asked. For 5 months. And he still took the house. Simone presented the printed text messages. 47 messages. 5 months. Every one of them time-stamped within minutes of a phone call between Deja and Renee. Every one of them containing something Renee had shared in what she believed was confidence. Judge Vance read through them. She read them slowly. The courtroom did not make a sound. Darnell sat at his table and looked at the surface of it. Not at Deja, not at Carver, not at Renee. He looked at the table with the expression of a man watching a structure he spent 16 months building develop a crack he cannot locate and cannot stop. Judge Vance closed the folder. She looked at Darnell for a long moment, then at Renee. This court finds that the father engaged in a systematic pattern of surveillance and interference through a third party during an active custody proceeding, she said. That conduct is inconsistent with the best interests of the children and reflects a fundamental failure of good faith that this court cannot overlook. She did not pause for effect. She just continued. Primary custody is hereby transferred to the mother, effective immediately. The father retains supervised visitation rights on a schedule to be determined within 14 days. Court is adjourned. She called the next case. Renee walked out of the courtroom, down the hallway, through the glass doors, down the steps into the October air on Pryor Street. She stopped on the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment, just standing, the city moving around her the way cities do, without pausing, without noticing. She took her phone out of her bag. She called Isaiah. He picked up on the second ring. Mom, you're coming home, baby. A silence, 1 second, 2, then the sound of her son trying to hold himself together and not quite managing it. When? Today. I'll be there by 4. She heard him breathe, heard him pull it back in, 9 years old and already learning how to carry things. Okay, he said. Tell Layla. She's right here. And then Layla's voice, 6 years old and completely uninterested in composure. Mom, are you coming? Is it today, Mom? It's today, baby. A sound from Layla that had no word for it. Just feeling. Pure and unfiltered and 6 years old, Renee stood on the sidewalk outside the Fulton County Courthouse and listened to her daughter make that sound. She did not cry on those steps. She waited until she was in the truck, 1 block north, parked on a side street. She sat in the driver's seat and put her hands on the steering wheel and let it go, just for a minute. Just enough. Then she put the truck in drive. Darnell did not call Renee. He sat in the courtroom after Judge Vance called the next case and did not move for a long moment. Carver was saying something beside him. Something about appeals, about the 14-day window, about what options remained. Darnell was not listening. He was looking at the door Deja had walked out of without looking at him. He called Carver's office the next morning. He asked about an appeal. Carver told him the text messages were in the record, 47 of them. Any appeal would be heard by a different judge looking at the same evidence. And anything he filed would extend the proceedings and the legal fees, which were currently sitting at $51,240. Darnell said he understood. He did not file the appeal. Within the month, 2 of his commercial loan accounts at Peachtree Capital were reassigned to other managers. No announcement, no meeting. Just an email informing him that effective the following Monday, those portfolios would be handled by a colleague. Combined value, $390,000 in management fees. Nobody said the court filing was the reason. Nobody had to. The filing was public record. The words were clear. Systematic surveillance, coercion, financial leverage, interference in active legal proceedings. The kind of language that, once attached to a person's name in a searchable document, tends to travel ahead of them. Darnell sat in the house on Collier Road and felt the ground shifting in a way he recognized. It was the same feeling, he realized, that he had spent 16 months engineering for Renee. The difference was she had seen it coming eventually and built something anyway. He hadn't seen this coming at all. Isaiah called his father on a Sunday evening 2 weeks after the hearing. Because Isaiah was 9 years old and had been raised by a woman who believed that however broken a thing was, you didn't teach your children to turn away from it entirely. You let them find their own footing. Darnell picked up, said he missed him, said he was sorry, said he was working on things. Isaiah was quiet for a moment. I know, Dad, a pause. Mom is cooking tonight. I have to go. He hung up, not cold, not cruel, not the dramatic rejection of a child who has been coached on what to feel. Just a 9-year-old boy who had somewhere he needed to be. Somewhere that smelled like smoked paprika and brown butter in the kitchen he was allowed to be in now. Darnell sat with the phone in his hand in the house on Collier Road. He looked at the kitchen from where he was sitting. The shelf above the microwave where the recipe book had sat for 11 years, empty now. He hadn't noticed when it became empty. He hadn't noticed when Renee took it the morning she left, the same way he hadn't noticed most of what she did for 12 years. He set the phone down. He did log off. The first evening, Isaiah and Layla came home, a Thursday. Late October, 3 days after the hearing. Renee had been up since 4. She cooked all morning at the church kitchen. She drove the truck route at lunch. She parked the truck behind Greater Grace at 2 in the afternoon, which she had never done, on a Thursday, and she drove to the house on Collier Road in the car she was still making payments on, and she knocked on the door. Darnell opened it. They looked at each other. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Layla appeared at Darnell's elbow, already holding a backpack, already wearing her shoes. Like she had been ready since morning. Like she had known this was coming and had been standing near the door all day, just in case. Mom, one word. But the way she said it. Isaiah came down the stairs with his bag over one shoulder, moving deliberately the way he always moved when he was trying to seem calm about something he was not calm about. He looked at his father. Bye, Dad. Darnell nodded. His jaw was set. He looked like a man holding something very tightly so it wouldn't show. Renee did not say anything to him. She took Layla's hand. She waited for Isaiah to come through the door. She walked them to the car. She did not look back at the house. The studio apartment on Memorial Drive was small. 1 bedroom. A kitchen with a window that looked out at a parking lot and the street beyond it. A table by that window that fit 3 people if nobody needed extra elbow room. Renee had moved the second mattress into the bedroom 2 days before, put fresh sheets on it, set a small lamp Isaiah liked on the nightstand between the 2 beds. Hung Layla's drawings on the wall above hers with tape, the ones Layla had made at Darnell's house and brought with her in the outside pocket of her backpack. She had opened the recipe book that morning to page 1, red beans and rice, the first recipe Celestine ever wrote down. The one with the note in the margin in blue ink. This one is for when somebody comes home. She cooked it slowly. The way Celestine taught her, the roux first, built without rushing, the color of dark honey. The trinity, onion, celery, bell pepper cooked down until soft. The beans soaked overnight and added whole. The low heat, doing what low heat does when you trust it. She let the fire do its work. Leia came into the kitchen first. She stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at everything: the stove, the pots, the recipe book open on the counter, the photograph of Celestine on the wall above it in its plain wood frame, clean glass. She walked to the photograph and stood in front of it. "Who is that?" she said. Renee looked up from the stove. "That's the woman who taught me everything I know." Layla looked at the photograph for another moment, at Celestine's white apron and flowered hands and the smile that knew something. Then she climbed into her chair at the table. Isaiah came in after. He set his backpack by the door. He looked at the apartment the way he looked at most things, quietly and all at once, filing it away. He pulled out his chair and sat down. Renee served the food, 3 plates, 3 glasses of sweet tea. The red beans over white rice, the pot liquor dark and thick, piece of cornbread set on the side that she had made from the recipe on page 3, because Celestine believed you did not serve red beans without cornbread, and that was not a suggestion. Isaiah ate without talking. Layla took a first bite. She chewed, she looked up at her mother. "This is the best food in the world, Mom." Same words, same voice, same absolute certainty. But not on the porch steps of a house she was no longer allowed inside. Not in a parking lot with a 15-minute window before Darnell's porch light came on. Not through a screen door with a bag of foil containers handed off like a transaction. At a table, in a kitchen, at home. Renee looked at her daughter. She looked at Isaiah, who had stopped eating and was looking at her too, and whose face was doing something complicated that 9-year-olds' faces do when they feel something too large to name and too important to say out loud. She looked at the recipe book on the counter. She looked at the photograph of Celestine above it, white apron. Flour on both hands, smiling like she had always known this was where it was going, like she had written it down in the margins somewhere and was waiting for Renee to get to that page. You feed people and you look them in the eye. That is how you tell someone they matter. Celestine had said that to Renee so many times it had stopped sounding like a lesson. It started sounding like a fact. Something that had always been true before either of them existed and would keep being true after both of them were gone. Darnell had watched Renee do it for 12 years. He ate her food. He hosted dinners built around her cooking. He built professional relationships on the backs of evenings she spent in a kitchen while he moved through those same evenings collecting credit he hadn't earned. He had seen it every day for 12 years. He had never understood what it was, not what it was made of. Not what it required of the person doing it, not what it gave to the people on the receiving end. He saw plates. He didn't see the conversation Renee was having with every single person who stood in that line or sat at that table. He didn't see Celestine in every recipe. He didn't see what it meant to make something from your hands and your memory and hand it to a stranger and have them say it tastes like home. You cannot take what you cannot name. And he could never name it. That was not Renee's loss, that was his. She did not think about him sitting in the house on Collier Road with the empty shelf above the microwave. She did not think about the accounts that were being reassigned, or the invoice from Carver's office that was sitting on his desk, or the quiet professional distance that had started to open up around him in the way it always opens up around people when a court filing becomes searchable and people start connecting names to documents. She thought about none of that. She looked at her children eating. She looked at the photograph of her grandmother on the wall. She looked at the recipe book, and she did what Celestine had always done. She sat at the table. She watched the people she loved eat the food she had made. And she did not say a word, because some things do not need to be said. Some things are already written down. In blue ink, in careful handwriting, on a page that says, "This one is for when somebody comes home."